In this video, we're going to learn all about sending email with Node.js, as well as taking a pug file, converting it to an HTML ready email, as well as then taking your CSS and inlining it. Because if you've ever done HTML email before, you'll know that it's a nightmare. It's really, really hard. And second, it needs to make sure that your CSS has been inlined into it in order to make sure that it works across all the different email clients. So whenever you're doing email sending in a development environment, I use something called Mailtrap. Now, there's a number of different services out there. This is a freemium one. It works for 20 cents, and then you delete the older ones, and you get new ones. But essentially what it does is, rather than set it up with an SMTP server, something like I personally use Postmark app to send all of my real email. But when I'm in development mode, I'll use Mailtrap. And what this does is that it fakes being a mail server. And then anytime you send mail to this fake mail server, it will, instead of actually sending it to your users, it will just put it into this Mailtrap. And you'll be able to quickly see who the emails are being sent to, what they look like, when they've been sent. And you don't have to worry about having to go to your own Gmail account or accidentally, which is a nightmare situation, accidentally sending some email out to some users which you had real data, but were in development mode. So go on over to mailtrap.io and sign up for an account. And I know there's other services that do this. So if you have a personal preference of one that you prefer, there's self-hosted versions as well. Feel free to go and set that up right now. Now, once you are signed up, you're going to have access to your SMTP credentials. We are going to be making what's called a transport with something called Node Mailer, and we need all of these credentials. So you tell me, where does sensitive information go? Well, it goes into our variables.env file. Open up our variables.env file. The port and host are already set up for Mailtrap. So if you're using Mailtrap, you can keep those the same. You see here, 2525, as well as mailtrap.io is the actual host. Then the username, we can just take right from here. And the password, we can take right from here. Good. So now whenever we try to send an email with these credentials, it's not going to actually make it to anyone's inbox. It's going to be trapped with Mailtrap. Good. Now, in order to actually send email, we need to make a new, what I like to call, handler. So open up your handlers, and we're going to make one called mail.js. There's a couple different packages we need in order to send email. First one is one called Node Mailer. And Node Mailer is really, really great because what it will do is it will interface with SMTP or any number of different what are called transports, and it will do the sending of the email for you. So we'll say const node mailer and require it. We also need something called pug juice HTML to text and our Promisify library. So I'm just going to type those in super speed here and make sure you grab them as well. Good. So I'll explain what all of these are in just a second. But right now, what we need to know is that we have our node mailer being set up, and we have to create what's called a transport. And a transport is a way that you interface with different ways of sending email, SMTP being the most common. So we'll say const transport equals nodemailer.create transport. That takes an object where you have a host, and now the host is going to be taken from here. Right? Just as we did everything else, we say process.env.mail_host. We have a port, which is going to be the exact same, but underscore port. Then we have an auth object. Inside of that, you have a user, which is going to be it should be port, mail_user. And then we have a pass, which is going to be mail_pass. Good. So what we just did there is we created a transport, and we can try to send a piece of email immediately. So if you ever just want to make sure that something works, you can actually just code right in here. And whenever the server starts up, it will send that email. So we can take our transport and call .sendMail. And sendMail is going to take some options here, which will have a from, boss, a to, I'll say randy@example.com. A subject, just trying things out. The HTML is going to be, hey, we'll put some HTML in here. Strong, love you. And then it also takes a text for those weirdos that don't get HTML email and only text, something like that. That was just text people can read. So good. We have our transport. We're sending over the mail. Then if we import this mail.js file into any one of our files that's already running, it should trigger this on page load and send us an email. So I'm going to do that in start.js. Let's just temporarily do it at the bottom here. Temp send email. Again, make sure to take this out later, and we'll just say require handlers mail. Good. So don't save it just yet, but clear this out. Give it a save. And you see that it ran, and all of a sudden this refreshed, and I say, hey, I love you. Just trying things out from Wes Boss to randy@example.com. You can see the HTML source that we did, but you can also see the text version of the email that we sent, the raw, the analysis, the checking HTML, et cetera, et cetera. So some handy stuff that comes along with this Mailtrap, not MailChimp. That's a different thing. Cool. So delete that. We don't need that. We know that it's actually working. And go back to your mail.js and again, get rid of the send mail as well, because we're going to make a method that sort of encapsulates that. But I just wanted to make sure that our host and port and user and password were done properly. Now, whenever somebody resets their password, we're going to call a function called send. So we'll say exports.send equals, we'll make it async, options, takes in some options. This will all make a sense in just a second. And we open up our curly brackets there. Good. Now what we want to do is make our mail options. So the const mail options is equal to from, and this is going to be the from for so whatever application you are doing. Say Wes Boss, and you can put in the email address in brackets here. So no reply at wesboss.com, whatever you want the from address to be. To this is going to be sent to the options.user.email. So we're going to pass in the user who it needs to be sent to once we find it. The HTML is going to be, say, well, this will be filled in later. And our text properly is this will also be filled in later. Good. So here's our options. Then we want to go ahead and promisify our send mail function, because by default, again, send mail will work as a callback. We want to promisify it. So say const send mail is equal to promisify transport send mail. We'll bind it to the transport. Again, transport is the Mailtrap one that we set up. And what's beautiful about that is once you swap out your variables.env for a production one, that'll all just hook up when you fill it up with something like Postmark app, which actually does send your email. So const send mail equals promisify. Good. We are going to return send mail, and we'll give it the mail options that we have there. And the mail options has the from, the to, the HTML text. Oh, and one last thing, we also need the subject, which is going to be the options.subject. That's going to get passed in. Good. Now we have this little function that will send mail, and we're going to hook it up to actually compile our pug files in just a second. But right now we're just going to be filling it in. And let's go to our password reset flow and actually get this to send when we've sent it. So that was in our auth controller, and we'll take a look. Where was it where we actually sent it? Here we go. In the function called forgot, we flashed, you have been emailed a password reset link. Okay, good. But we don't want to actually send them the URL. Remember we were doing that with that variable reset URL? Take that away. And one line above it, we're going to use our mail.send. Okay. Well, we need to import this mail library real quick from here. So go to the top, const mail equals require, up a level because we're in controllers, then into our handlers, then into our mail.js file, and then we'll go back down to our exports.forgot, and we'll say mail.send. And there's a couple options that need to be passed. It's a one big object. The user is going to be the actual user that we found when we did our database query. So the user is equal to the user, or just user. And then the subject is going to be password reset. Then we also need to pass along the reset URL. So reset URL is going to be equal to reset URL, or like we've been doing all along, just reset URL. Good. So we are going to await that mail to send, And then once it's been sent, we're going to flash a success message and redirect to a login. So let's see. Let's try the reset flow once more. I'll go back to our application. I'm going to log out. I'm going to click on login. Forgot my password. Send the reset. It says you have been emailed the password reset link. If we go back to our mail trap inbox here, we see that we have a new mail that's arrived, password reset, and we don't see anything other than that it was sent to the correct address, and the HTML and the text tell us that what will be filled in later. Good. So we have our email sending at the right point, but now the question is, how do we get the HTML generating? Because we looked at views, email layout, and password reset. This is all done in Pug. How do we convert it from Pug into HTML? And then how do we take our HTML and our CSS and inline it? So that's what we're going to be doing next. We'll go back into our mail.js, and we're going to make a function called generate HTML. It's like const generate HTML is equal to an arrow function. And that arrow function is going to take in two things, a file name and an options object, which will default to just being a blank object. Okay, but why is that not exports.generate HTML? It's just const. And the reason behind that is because it's not needed anywhere outside of this mail.js file. So we're just going to make it a regular function here rather than have to export it because it's not needed anywhere else. Now, we make a variable called HTML, and we use our Pug library that we imported right here. And we're going to use one of the methods on Pug called render file. And that will take the name of the actual file that we're looking for, which in our case is going to get passed in as password-reset.pug. Now, there's a bit of a problem here because whenever you have render file or whenever you pass a function reference to something on your disk, you don't actually know where you are in the folder system because, of course, right now we're in a handlers folder, but this render file folder, it's in a totally different folder and it gets a little bit mixed up. So what we can use there is we use backticks. We can use one of these variables that is available to us in any file, and it's called __dir name. And you see how it turned blue there? That means my editor knows that that's a special variable, sort of like window or console in the browser. We have this variable that's always available to us in every single file, and dir name is going to be equal to the current directory that we are running this file from, which in our case is going to be like my hard drive, blah, 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 /handlers. So dir name will give us what we're looking for. Then we will go up a level, so /, /, because we don't want to be in the handlers folder. We want to be in the main folder. Then we go into views, into email, and then into the file name .pug on the end. And then as a second argument, we are going to pass the options that got passed into the render file. And the options is going to contain all the information like the reset variable and the user's email address. Then what that will do is let's just console log, or let's return the HTML, and we can console log the HTML as well, just so we can see where we're at. And we can go back into our mail options or right above it, and we can make an HTML variable and use our new function called generate HTML. What do you need to pass it? Well, options.filename is going to be the name of the file. And then it also, see, there we go. It also expects us to pass the options variable as well. Then we can take that HTML variable and swap out the this will be filled in later with HTML, or again, because they're the same thing, just HTML. And when we now run this, it should go off to our Pug, find this password reset.pug, generate it into HTML, return it, which will allow us to then pass it along to our mail option. So let's try it. wesboss@gmail.com, give it a reset. Tells us it worked properly. Let's go back to our mail trap inbox. Don't see anything. Give it a refresh. There we go. Just showed up. Click it. Hey, look what's going on here. Password reset. Hello, you requested a password reset. Please click the following button to continue to reset. Blah, 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 blah. And then see this localhost 777 account reset. And then my token. That's because when we generated the actual reset URL, we passed it via our mail.send, which then accepted it via mail.send and gave it to all of our pug template files. So following me here, then if we look at our password reset pug, we use that variable reset URL inside of here. And that's how it got to my actual users at the end of the day. So good so far. A couple more things is my text still says it will be filled in later. And also I haven't inlined my CSS, which is a bit of a problem. It works fine here because I'm on the web, but if I open the sucker up in Windows XP 95, it's not going to work really well because the CSS should be inlined. So we'll head back to our mail.js and let's deal with the text one first because it's pretty simple. We imported a library here called HTML to text. And what that will do is you just give it HTML and it's going to, guess what? Going to give you text. And what that will do is it will make all of your text-based readers who answer their email in Vim or whatever they're doing, it will give them a nice, clean HTML-free email and still allow them to read it. So we'll go here. We'll simply just say const text is equal to HTML to text dot from string, and you pass it all of our HTML. And that's just going to make a nice formatted with spaces and asterisks around the bold stuff. And swap that out with here, or again, just text. Good. Let's check if the text is now working. So I'm going to say westboss@gmail.com. Worked fine. Open up my password reset. It looks good. If I click on text, you'll see, here we go. Password reset is all in caps. And it will then show the person the actual URL that they can visit rather than giving them any sort of link. So good, good, good. Last thing is, how do you inline CSS? Well, there is a module called Juice. And what it does is you give it HTML with style tags, and it will take those style tags and it will inline them in every single paragraph. It will figure out what selectors match what HTML and inline all of our CSS for us, which is exactly what you need when you're running HTML. Because if we look in our console here, you'll see that this is our actual HTML here, trtd h2 password reset, and this CSS here is not going to apply to any of this HTML in many email clients. So we can go back to our generate HTML, and what we can do is rather than console log it, we can make a new variable called inlined and just take juice and pass it the HTML. And it's going to do all of its work for us. And then rather than returning HTML, we're going to return inlined. Good. That was easy. Just 2 little lines of code. Now, if I try to reset my password and go back to my inbox here, it looks exactly the same for me. But if we click on the HTML source, you'll see that it's all on one line. But you see how the body style tag is inlined, or the H2 tag has margin bottom, line height, font weight, font family, has all of that stuff inline. That's exactly what Juice will do, is it will take all the labor-intensive inlining and just automatically do it for you without having to use. I used to go to just search for like CSS inliner tool. I would find like the MailChimp one, and then I would just paste it into here, and then it would take my HTML and my CSS and convert it for me. But this will automatically do absolutely everything for me, which I was really, really happy to do. So that is sending email with Node.js. It's really nice because you can reuse this send function over and over again. And really all you need to do is just pass it a new file name, as well as a new subject and a new user of who to send that email to.